So remember in here one of our early assignments when we had to do that processed expression? Didn't we have that guy where I gave you like you had to do like 123 plus 15 minus 7? Do we have to do that in here? All right, well then it'll come soon enough. But so you'll take in a string and you have to split that string apart into its individual pieces and then do a math formula from left to right. All right, and so it's a pretty difficult assignment because it's just tedious. But I tell you, it only has to support left to right. So this is an algorithms class because if you start taking an order of operation, like multiplication should come before addition, that kind of stuff, and also parentheses, now all of a sudden certain parts of the math have to happen first. So there's this algorithm called the shunting yard algorithm, which does that. All right. So what we did in the class is we wrote this this Android app that kind of shows you the steps of it, so we stepped through. So we did this during a 4-hour class last night. So you might have, let's do the following, whatever. So let's do 23 plus 18 minus 2 times 17 divided by 4 or something like that. So when you click process, it throws everything into this stack. So these are all the individual tokens. And then you can walk through it. So with each step, it either adds something to the operator queue or the output queue, but it follows the rules. So you can walk through the algorithm one step at a time. So since a 23 is just a number, it goes to the output queue. A plus goes into the op queue as long as the current value at the top of the op queue says it's allowed to. In this case, it's empty, so yes, it is. 18 goes to the output. Minus will go onto the op queue, but after removing the plus sign from the op queue and putting it in the output queue. So you walk through the whole thing, and you can see the algorithm on a step-by-step basis, and then it gives you the final math that it did order of operation. But it's kind of an interesting thing of some of the stuff you can do. And this is actually a pretty easy interface. So these, we're doing stacks in there. So these 3 things are all stacks. But all this was this is a vertical linear layout. This is a vertical linear layout. This is a vertical linear layout. And it's housed inside of a horizontal linear layout. So I just add text views to these guys whenever I want. So I add a text view, I remove a text view to move things around. So it's a pretty simple interface that looks reasonable, right? So kind of an interesting way to visualize an algorithm. Okay. So we're team roster, right? All right, well, what does this guy, am I recording? Yeah. Let's see, what does this guy currently do? Oh, right now it just, you can click me, it puts it there. If I hit next screen, it goes here, and oh, I'm doing the Singleton thing, right? Okay. So it really doesn't do anything related to the project currently. Okay, so we're supposed to add a screen for creating a player, right? That was the homework assignment. And a player is what? A jersey number and a skill rating? Okay, so let's go ahead and create a new activity for our add player entry, right? So let's do that. So we'll come up here. We'll do, oh, remind me while I'm doing this, what is a singleton? What does a singleton mean as far as the design pattern, and what do we use it for? Oh, just
send information. It's pretty much a database where the main screen or the input sends it up in there, and I think another screen can only read it out.
Okay. So if you had to give me a concise definition for what the singleton design pattern says, what would you say?
Oh, it only makes sense in there.
What makes sense in your head? Okay.
Store things like for a place that you wait. Good idea to store things that need to be shared between more than to then type entities in a single place.
Okay. So I like how you memorize that. Okay. So.
I don't know, like, it's hard to explain it in English, but I know.
No, I got you. So, first of all, I want you to continue to really look at the stuff and try to make connections to how it fits into real life. So, Singleton says it's a good idea to store things that need to be used by lots of stuff in one place. So, the example I might use is if, a bunch of us were sharing a car, we might pick a drawer over there to keep the keys in. And if you need the car, you check the drawer. And if the keys are there, you can use the car. If they're not there, somebody's using the car. All right, so we have it shared there instead of having to go and chase down whoever currently has the keys. All right, Singleton's the same thing. We named it core here, so we created a drawer, if you will, okay, an object that sits up there, and all the activities have access to that object. And anything that we want to be shared among multiple activities, we can toss up into that object so that this guy can write something there and this guy can read something from there. So that's what we're currently doing with our singleton. Go ahead.
With ours, I think it's called code, so we would have to make an object, or called core, we would have to make an object called core, right? Or can we make multiple objects in the singleton that are named something else other than the public class?
Well, I guess your question is pretty vague.
Like if I
First of all, it doesn't need to be called core. You can call it whatever you want.
Okay.
Yeah, that's just naming convention. I happen to call my singletons core typically.
Well, because like with an Eclipse, when we wanted to make an object or constructor, it had to be the same public class as us. So I was going off of that, but like if I wanted to make a player object in here, I can still leave a player, because I was having issues with that.
Well, let's say you wanted to have, let's say we selected a player from the roster. We could do something like static player. We don't have one of those. This is going to be an error. Maybe we call it selected player. All right, so some screen in our application might give us a list of players. We click on a player, and on that, it sets this variable to the current player we have selected. And then maybe you can go and look at that player's stats on a different screen. And when that different screen loads, he checks this guy and says, who do you currently have selected so I can load up his stats? Something like that. So this guy, so this guy does not have a constructor. You referenced constructors a few minutes ago. Why does he not have a constructor? This comes down to an understanding of when we would use static stuff versus non-static stuff. Why do you think I do not have a constructor in this class? Try not to differentiate between Eclipse and Android Studio. Java is Java. These are just the tools we're using for it. And when we do something, we're doing it because it's the right way to solve a problem. All right. Now, when I make something private, so let's just go down this rabbit hole. What does it mean to make something private? Could only be accessed in that class. Now, why would these guys not be private? Because I need access outside of this class, right? We want other dudes to be able to access this drawer. Okay, so we don't make them private for that reason. Okay, so now back to why don't I have a constructor?
Creating a new object type.
Okay, what do you mean by that?
So in our player class, we will have a constructor because we are creating like a new object type that we want to be able to take in a certain amount of parameters.
Yeah, we're gonna have multiple players. Soccer team's got a bunch of players, right? This player is different than this player, even though they're built with the same blueprint. They're individual instances of players. Okay. Now, I've made these fields all static. What does that mean to be a static field? How do I call static fields? Using the name of the class in which the field was defined. So these fields, name and number, are both defined inside of a class called core. So I would say core.name, core.number to access those values, not a particular instance of core. We have a single drawer using our analogy to the drawer with the keys in it. We have a single drawer that exists. Not multiple copies of this guy, but one drawer that we're using to hold all sorts of values that we want to share across our multiple instances of activities. So this activity can check the drawer. This activity is checking that exact same drawer, not a drawer that looks like it. Okay, not a second instance of our drawer, but the exact same drawer. So we make these guys static in here because we want them to only exist one time. They're owned by the class. It's the class that owns one variable, a unique value called name. It's the class that owns a unique value called number. And all of our activities, for example, that are using this core class, that are accessing this drawer, are checking the exact same values, not something that's similar. That makes sense? So we don't have a constructor in here because it doesn't make sense for us to create instances of the core class. We don't want instances. We want there to be one drawer. Does that make sense? It's not wrong. We can put a constructor in here. We can say public core, takes no parameters, do whatever we want in there. But we would never call that because we don't want to say core C equals new core and then C dot name. First of all, that would be illegal. It wouldn't be legal code because these are static members down here. These are static fields. Okay? But secondarily, I don't want to have this variable C's name be different than C2's name. I want there to be a single variable called name. That make sense? Okay, so this isn't like a memorization thing. This is a right tool for the job thing. I want to have a bucket of variables that lives up there. That's our singleton. And I want to be able to conveniently access that bucket of variables from anywhere in our application. Make sense? All right. So let's go ahead and gut some of this because we're not going to need some of these things. And I'm going to go ahead and let's start moving towards our actual soccer application. So I created my add player activity. I'm going to go ahead and delete screen 2 because we're not going to need that guy. And then I'm going to go into my layout and we're going to delete the screen 2 layout. I'll go into my main activity and we reference screen 2 in this next page button clicked. So let's get rid of that guy. And then we have this button clicked. Let's get rid of that guy. We're not going to have that button anymore. Okay. And we're also not going to have these edit text things anymore. We'll rebuild those things if we want. And then we'll delete this stuff here. All right. So now we're basically back to an empty app, right? All right, so I'll go into my activity main here. We'll go ahead and get rid of that guy. We'll get rid of that guy. We'll get rid of that guy. We'll get rid of that guy. So if I look at this, all I have here, we'll get rid of our horizontal. So I just have my relative layout with my vertical linear layout sitting in there. Make sense? So we're going back to our team management application, and inside here we want to have the ability to create a player or add a player to the team. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to throw a button in here. There's our button, and this guy's gravity is currently set to center, but whatever, that's fine. It kind of is unnerving, but we'll leave it. Doesn't that just seem weird to have a centered button? I don't know, I don't like it. All right, so we're going to call this guy add player. That's going to be the text on that button. All right, and actually I've decided I really don't like it. So I'm going to change the gravity here. All right. How come I can never? Oh, there it is. Here. Now it's at the top. That makes me feel better. For no good reason. It's just bugging me. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to write a function to handle the event click for our add player, and that guy should take me to my screen. That gives me the couple of fields to add a player's jersey and skill level, right? All right, so inside of our main activity, we're going to go ahead and create a function here. Public void add player button pressed, and this guy will take in a view v as a parameter. And what we want to do is we want to go ahead and launch our add player activity. Okay, so we're going to say intent I is equal to new intent. Now to build an intent, we need to give it the current context in which we're building the intent, which is from this activity. And then we need to give it the class name of the intent of the class that we want to launch. In this case, that guy is called add player activity dot class. So there's our intent, and then we'll say this dot start activity I to launch that page. Make sense? That's how we launch a new activity. So let's go into our add player activity here. And this guy by default's a relative layout. The very first thing I almost always do is I go ahead and put a vertical linear layout in this guy and just have him stretch all the way out. Now I have my nice little canvas. All right, so let's go ahead and let's put a text view up here. And we'll center this guy. And the text that's going to go in there is add new player. And let's make the font a lot bigger for that guy. We'll make it 30, and we'll make it bold. All right, so this is the screen for adding a new player. All right, so to add a new player, we need to take in two pieces of information. Okay, we need to take in a jersey number, and we need to take in a skill level. Okay, and right now we only know how to read things in with text boxes, so we'll just give ourselves a couple of text boxes here. So we're going to have edit text, and we're reading in numbers for both of those. Okay, so we'll throw a number in here, and we're going to set the hint for this guy as jersey number. And we'll go ahead and center this. So we're going to enter the jersey number there. And then we want to have another. So these are all edit text, and notice that different ones have different things associated with it. You could have used plain text here, but number, I think, gives you the keyboard that just has number stuff on it. So not the end of the world, but whatever. So we have jersey number, and then we have skill level. And I'll go ahead and center that. Okay. So those are those couple of guys. And then I'm going to go ahead and add a button for add player. Okay. So we're going to throw a button in here. And we'll make this button say add player. Like that. And this button will be the guy that ultimately adds the player. Okay. Now let's call this guy, instead of just edit text, we're going to call this guy jersey number ET, and we'll call this guy skill level ET. That way we can give ourselves programmatic access to those dudes. All right. Now for right now, let's just make sure we can get to this screen, so we can definitely differentiate our add new player screen from our original screen, right? You know, this screen definitely looks different than this screen. All right, so we're going to have this screen pop up, and we want add player to ultimately take us to this other screen. So that means we're going to have to go to the clickable, I'm sorry, not clickable, onto the onClick event for this guy. Here's onClick, and we're going to do the add player button press. I'm actually just going to backspace this because I'm dealing with about a 30% success rate. So I always take the parentheses stuff off. It almost always works with the parentheses stuff off. So that's what we do when that guy is clicked. Isn't that interesting? You actually put it back. I think I have to press enter on it. There we go. Still put it back. Let's just leave it. We're good. I think it works. All right. So this add player should then call that function that's inside of main activity. That's this guy right here, which should create the intent to launch our add player activity from the current context, which is from that activity, the main screen activity, and then we'll tell it to go ahead and start that activity, which should launch our second screen. So let's go ahead and launch our app. All right, so here's our app. Click Add Player, takes us to our Add New Player screen. All right, so now the job of this screen is to read in two pieces of information. It's to read in a jersey number, and it's to read in a skill level, and ultimately create a new player object out of that, those two pieces of information, and store that player object somewhere. Now, as we think about our soccer application, chances are we're going to need our array list of players accessible from multiple screens, right? So it probably makes sense for us to go ahead and store that guy up in the singleton. So what I'm going to do is, here in the singleton, I'm going to go ahead and create our array list, and there's only going to be one list of players. It's going to be static. It's going to be an array list of type player. Now, I don't have a player object yet, so I need to go and create my player object. Let's keep that empty for a second. So I'm going to right-click here. We're going to create a new Java class called player, just like we did in Eclipse. All right. So here's my normal plain Jane Java class called player. And players have two pieces of information we keep track of. We keep track of the jersey number. We keep track of the skill level. So we're going to make both of those guys private int jersey number, private int skill level. Then we have our constructor, public player. It's going to take in a jersey number and a skill level. We'll set this dot jersey number equal to jersey number. This dot skill level equal to skill level. All right, now we want to have the ability to access these values here. So we can update a player, right? We can change his jersey number. So we need getters and setters for this guy if we kind of think forward. So we'll right-click here. We'll say generate getter and setter. We want to do it for both of those dudes. Hit OK. So there's our getters and setters. So now a player object is able to hold two pieces of information, and we can then create player objects with those two pieces of information, and then we can get at those two pieces of information. That's all players know how to do right now. Okay, it's kind of a new variable type we just built. So it's a variable that is capable of holding two values. All right, so now that we know what an individual player is, we have that blueprint for that, we can go into core and we can create our array list of type player, and we'll call this guy the players. And this is going to be equal to a new array list of type player. So I have an empty container that can hold an arbitrary number of players. Make sense? So remember the first iteration of this team management thing, we were only supposed to hold 5 players. We actually represented that with parallel arrays. Remember that? So what we did is we created 2 integer arrays, each with 5 buckets in them. So int jersey numbers equal to new int array, or int array jersey numbers is equal to a new int array 5. And then int array skill levels equal new int array 5. And then we put at bucket 0 of both of those, a jersey number and the corresponding skill level, so on and so forth. Okay. Then we translated that into an array of player objects. So we had player array, the players, is equal to new player array 5. Then we upgraded to say, hey, now we can hold more than 5 players, and we can do this in an array list, which we don't have to tell it its fixed size to begin with. Instead, we just create an array list capable of holding player objects, and then we can throw player objects into it, and the guy just gets bigger and bigger and bigger to hold however many player objects it has. All right, so I've gone to Target. I've got my container here that knows how to hold players. I've thrown it into my singleton, so I have access to it from any of my activities. So now whenever I need to work with my collection of players, I can talk to the singleton to get that collection of players. That make sense? All right, so right now that guy has no players in it. So what we want to do is when we click that button on our add player activity, so we're going to have our event here, so we're going to say public void add player button press. It's going to take a UV parameter. Okay. When that guy gets pressed, we want to take the value from our 2 text fields, build a brand new player out of that. So we need to get the integer version of the values from those 2 text fields. Actually, we don't even need them as integers, do we? We can have these as strings because we're not doing math with them, are we? We actually do math with skill level. Let's leave them as ints. We'll just convert it at this point. Because we do math with the skill level to show all people who have a certain skill level or better. All right, it's not going to hurt anything to do this. Where am I at here? Add player. So when the add player button is created, we need to read in the 2 values from our edit texts, convert them to integers, build a brand new player object with those 2 integers, and then store that player object in our array list. That's the steps, right? Get values, build player object, put player object in array list. All right, that's the algorithm. So before we even start writing the code for this, we need to understand the problem that we're solving. That's the problem that we're solving. Okay? Step 1 of that problem is get the 2 values from our edit texts. Now in order to do that, I need to have access to my edit texts. In code right now, I do not have access to the edit texts. So I need to give myself programmatic access to those. So we'll go back and remind ourselves the name of those 2 dudes. I clicked on the wrong dude. It's this one. So my jersey number edit text was called jersey number ET. That's what I named him. My skill level was called skill level ET. So I need to give myself access to those 2 guys in my code. So I'm going to go to my add player. Up top here, I'll go ahead and give myself a couple of private variables. So private edit text, jersey number ET, private edit text, skill level ET. You can name them whatever you want, but those are good enough names since they kind of match the, they do match the name of our edit text. So now these are 2 variables that are capable of holding those 2 edit texts. But I don't have them initialized yet. I just created some variables that we can associate those values with. Now, here in OnCreate, this is our first opportunity in the activities lifecycle for us to interact with the actual interface. So this is the first point in time when we have access to those widgets. So I'm going to go ahead and we're going to grab those 2 values. So we're going to say this dot jersey number ET is equal to the edit text version of this dot find view by ID r dot ID dot jersey number ET. Okay, so now before we go on, somebody explain to me what all is happening on that line. I've said it out loud several times, but obviously I probably know what it does. But we'll pretend like I forgot, so somebody needs to remind me. I just got lucky. Sometimes I slap at the keyboard and stuff happens. So what's actually occurring on this line? Okay, what's that? What are we doing right there?
We're assigning a value to our edit text name, jersey number
Yeah.
ET.
Yeah, keep it simple. We're assigning a value to a variable. Right? This is our assignment operator. This guy's the name of a variable, specifically as an instance variable, so it's a guy that's owned by an instance of this class. How do we know that this guy right here is an instance variable? Not him. How do we know that that guy right there is an instance variable? This is not an Android question. This is a question that was on the midterm. Being able to differentiate instance variables from class variables. Yeah. Nope. What does private mean? He just told us a few minutes ago what private means. Only available in the class. Good. He probably won't forget that next time. No static. No static. Okay, so since this guy does not have static in front of it, it's a non-static field. Therefore, it's owned by the class. Or I'm sorry, therefore it's owned by an instance of this class. So non-static means instance field. Instance variable in this case. Static means class field. So since this guy does not have static out front, he's owned by the class, or he's owned by the instance of the class. Therefore, in order to access this particular instance of a class, I use the this keyword. So I say this dot jersey number ET. Now, could I have just said this like that? Could I have just said jersey number ET equals? Or is that an error? Well, no red squiggly, so probably not an error. Why does this work? Why is it okay for me to omit this there? Also not Android specific. In fact, very little of what we're doing here is Android specific. Only the layout and the activity stuff is. Go ahead. Okay. That's true, but that's not actually the reason why we can choose not to use this here. We're going to say that this is optional here. But why is it optional in this case? All variables resolve to what? Their most local definition. All variables resolve to their most local definition. What's the most local definition of jersey number ET? What's the first place? Where's the first place it's going to look? Well, that's where it's going to find it at the top. But where's the first place it's going to look? What's the most local scope to this guy right here? It's the scope local to OnCreate. So it's going to look in there first, and it's going to say, I do not see a definition for a variable named jersey number. Okay? But I'm not going to give up hope. I'm going to keep looking. Okay? We're looking for our keys. We didn't find them in the living room. Let's go check the garage. All right? So the next place we're going to do is we're going to go to the next global scope. Next global scope is this guy, the scope in which the scope we just checked lives. And we do find a definition of jersey number there. We found our keys. It was in the garage. All right? So we actually had to look in two places in order to find that variable. So under the hood, when you guys take the 470 class with me, we write a programming language and we create a variable environment. So you'll see that we search at a local scope and then we have to go up to the next most local scope to keep our search. Okay, this is no different than if you're looking for something in your house. You know, you check right around you first, then you concentric circles, and then you usually it's your phone that you lost, and then you have somebody else call your phone, right? Eventually, and you follow the sounds, and then you realize, oh, I had it on silence. So it's like, everybody be quiet. Like listening for the buzzing, right? If it's on a hardwood floor, you have a fighting chance.
What if it didn't silent and you turn off the buzzing with?
Oh, well, then you got to rely on one of the cats at some point to drag it out and start playing with it. Actually, it was a very weird interaction with one of my cats. This was years ago. You know, for those laser mice, you have the little USB thing, but tiny, right? It plugs into the USB for it to talk to. Well, I lost that. I dropped it. I couldn't find it on the floor. So, you know, I'm joking around to my cat. I'm like, Gracie, you know, help me find it. She found that within 10 seconds. Okay, she like, I don't know, squiggled back behind this bookcase thing, and came out, was like pawing at it. And like freaked me out because like in my mind I pretend like she kind of, but she did. She understood what I was saying, and that from that point on there was a level of reverence. Wouldn't that like creep you out? Like I talk this good game, but like what if one day Mr. Gonzalez says something back? Like you saw the movie Ted. All of a sudden, the kid comes downstairs and his teddy bear's talking, and the parents go nuts. Yeah, I mean, I'm already going to end up in the white coat and that thing. But at this pace, I may be 5-6 years away. But I mean, now we're talking accelerating that to like 2 weeks, right? If Mr. Gonzalez starts talking. So and I assume Captain Crunch hasn't said a word yet. All right, keep me posted. You guys know who Captain Crunch is, right?
Like cereal.
No, Captain Vladimir Crunch.
Oh.
He was one of the prizes at the hackathon. He's Mr. Gonzalez's identical twin cousin from Toronto.
Oh, Toronto.
That's where he's from.
You can't be evil and from Canada. It doesn't
Why does he have to be evil? Was it just because his name is Vladimir? You just assume he's evil? It's not race, that's culturist? What is that? What is that?
You said identical twin cousin.
Yeah.
You said evil.
No, I said identical twin cousin.
Oh yeah, Vladimir probably.
But you're kind of missing it. The chances of having an identical twin cousin is low.
Possible.
I mean,
It's possible. If you have twin moms and twin dads and they each marry each other, you can have identical cousins.
yeah, but it probably becomes something else because I don't want to get too far into the birds and the bees here.
No, like they could be completely different related.
No, I get it. And so they can look identical, but typically when we say identical twins, there's very specific things that have to happen, and it's a localized event. All right? Okay, I mean, this doesn't cross zip codes, let alone countries. Because Mr. Gonzalez is obviously from New York. All right. So this here is not required because we will end up finding jersey number ET upon looking, because we do not have a local variable here that conflicts with it, as opposed to over here in player, where I purposely named my local variable's jersey number because that's what we take in. We take in the jersey number. So shouldn't we name it jersey number? We shouldn't necessarily arbitrarily name this guy differently than we named him up here, because they mean the same thing. So we want our variables to be descriptive. Well, with that in mind, this dot jersey number references a different variable than just jersey number. Because as he pointed out, jersey number, variables always resolve to their most local definition. The most local definition of jersey number here is this guy right here. But when I throw the this in front of it, I'm telling it, look, don't search locally. Go ahead and check the garage first. Okay? This guy here is owned by this particular instance of the player class. You will find him up here. Make sense? So we're being explicit there. I always encourage you to be explicit regardless. Whether it was required or not, it's never wrong to throw this in front. Okay? So we went ahead and got our jersey number. So that's the first part of what this is doing. All right. What is this guy? What can you tell me about that guy? This is just exhilarating participation. Go ahead.
Did you say it was like a hack on Android?
Yeah, we're.
Or at least the ARM?
Yep. So this R class, this guy right here, is something that's built into Android. Now, tell me, by looking at this, what must ID be? What kind of animal is ID?
Identify of the
I'll give you options. Okay. It's a cat, dog, constructor, field, or method. Cat, dog, constructor, field, or method. Which of those is ID there? And if you're leaning towards cat and dog, those will throw you off the... So ID, is that guy a constructor, a field, or a method? Somebody else.
I think it's a field.
Like a field, what?
It's referring to the name of the text for the just number.
Okay. You know it. You're trying to connect it to its meaning. We can tell that this guy is a field just by the way it looks, whether it said ID or whether it said elephant. You're right. This guy is a field. So I'm looking for why do we know it's a field? All methods and constructors would have what? Parameter lists. We would have open and closing parentheses. If it was a method, we'd have open and closing parentheses if it was a constructor. What else would we see if it was a constructor? Every single time we call upon a constructor in Java, we see what? Who's hanging around? This guy is a constructor, right? We know it's a constructor because it has the same name as the class name. Who's hanging around? New keyword. Okay? Constructors are always preceded by the new keyword. So we don't see parentheses, so it's not a constructor or a method. If we did see parentheses, but we didn't see the new keyword, it's not a constructor. So on and so forth. So we could identify these guys with a very high reliability of certainty just by the way they look. So since this dude does not have parentheses, it's right off the bat a field. Now, if I were to look at the definition of that field in the R class, if we went and hunted in the R class, would we find static in front of that field, or would we not find static in front of that field? I know I keep beating this horse to death, but we keep getting it wrong. This is such an important concept.
I think yes, because it's owned by the R class.
How do you know it's owned by the R class?
Because the R is class.
R is the class name. How do you know that R is the class name? Why do you suspect? Because you can't know that with 100% certainty. You're right, it is. What makes you suspect that that guy's probably a class name?
Because it's method.
Okay. Okay, besides my obvious infallibility,
I don't know.
this goes back to when we first started talking about objects. As a naming convention, typically objects start with a capital letter. So it's not a rule. I mean, there's nothing about Java that said we could not have made this class player like that, except it has to match the name of our file, and our file has a capital P in it. So we would have to make this lowercase p player.java. But we're allowed to do that in Java. But in most object-oriented languages, well, it's not a language thing. In most object-oriented programming paradigms, we would say that classes start with a capital letter. Instances of classes typically start with a lowercase letter. If we follow that naming convention, we typically can then identify things by their case. So with that in mind, since we see R is capitalized, with some pretty good confidence, we can say that guy must be a class. Okay? And if he's a class, and we're using the class to call this field, that field must be a class field. Therefore, it's a static field. We would see static in front of ID if we were able to look inside of the R class. Okay? Now, what is jersey number ET? Forget about what the word says. That could just as easily say elephant right now. So don't get caught up in what we're getting used to identifying things by looking at them. What kind of animal is that? Is it a field, a method, or a constructor? We should all be shouting. Every one of us should know this now. Do we see parentheses? There's only one dude that doesn't have parentheses. It's a field, right? That guy's a field. Is it a static field or a non-static field? Who's calling this guy? That dude is calling jersey number. Who's that dude? Is that guy a class? Or is it an instance of a class? How do you know? Why do you suspect? You actually, in this case, 100% know. But you could operate off of the last little lesson we learned about classes are typically capitalized. Not capitalized, therefore, very likely that guy is an instance of a class. Make sense? Lowercase are typically instances, if the first character is lowercase. Uppercase, typically classes. On top of that, you also can't have a field that is a class. We can have a field whose type is a class, but we can't have a field that is a class. So it kind of breaks the language thing, but we can operate off of just the capitalization rule in this. Okay? So r.id.jersey number says, let's go into the class that was generated by Android for us, this hack thing to give us access to this is how MVC is implemented in Android. Let's go into that class. In that class, we must have a collection of IDs. So this field right here must be some sort of collection type, whether it's an array list or whatever, it's something, some kind of specialty collection. So it's a collection of IDs, and I want a specific ID from that guy. All right, and I believe that this guy actually takes in an integer as a parameter. So all that there resolves down to an int, which is the unique identifier for that particular widget on our screen. Okay, so once I have the unique identifier, kind of like our social security number or something like that, okay, or our phone number. Once we have that, we can go and look up, we can have this activity go and find that actual physical view, right? If I have your phone number, might be a little bit of a weird wild goose chase, right? It's probably going to be easier to have your name. But if I have your phone number, I can run around campus, go up to each individual person, shake him and say, what's your phone number? And then check to see if it matches. Inefficient, creepy, okay? But would eventually work out. Okay, I might have to kind of create a situation. I mean, by the cafeteria is going to be a pretty good bet, right? You're not going to catch everybody because some people won't go in there with explosive diarrhea issues. But I see you in the cafeteria pretty often.
Yeah. I go pretty much every
Yeah, I like the cafeteria. See, most of you, this is your first college you've been to. I don't think you realize how good you have it with this cafeteria.
My aunt went to ISU, Illinois State. She said they had like McDonald's as part of the meal swipes, the Taco Bell, Panda Express, and like that's nice.
But is it? That's not all I can eat to begin with, because they also have a cafeteria.
Right.
I mean, so what you're talking about is their equivalent of the Nest. Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, those things exist. You just don't have it at a place like this because of Sodexo.
Right.
It's how the contracts work. But I mean, Sodexo has different food plans, and most of them don't come with like made-to-order pasta where they're flash fried. Yeah, most of them you get to choose between like the blue and the green. You know, like I'll have some of the blue and just a little bit of the green. Do you get the movie reference?
No.
What is it?
Matrix.
Well, no, that's blue. That's blue and red pill. Yeah, but buffet, blue and green. That's from another movie, older than you guys are probably. National Lampoon's Las Vegas Vacation. Yeah. That was actually my wife and my first date in the theater.
I hate when they have the people like where you put your trays, like yourself to collect the food that you don't eat. Sometimes it's just like, well, it looked good when I wanted to eat it. They just made really bad food that I didn't want to eat.
Well, right, but it is pretty effective though. I mean, because we're all gonna have waste like that sometimes. You just thought it looked good and it wasn't good, but when you make that first trip and you just pile a whole tray up because your eyes are bigger than your stomach, and then you waste it, it at least makes you think so that the next time you go into the cafeteria, hey, it's all you can eat. Take your first plate, eat it, still hungry, go up and get more. Right? You can go up as many times as you want, plus you burn a little calories on your way back up, so it's actually kind of like it's efficient. Just got to think about it. But that was the thing from National Lampoon's, it was efficiency. The cousin bought the dinner at this, like low-end buffet that just had blue and green stuff up there, but he said, the Chevy Chase character is like, oh, well, he went to grab a plate. The cousin's like, no, you don't need a plate. It's all you can eat. We only need one plate. It's the only one to pay for one buffet. All right. So this gives us, so our activity itself will go and find the view with this unique identifier. This guy will boil down to that. Why do I have this in front? What's the purpose of that?
So that when it goes to look at the layout, it doesn't look at each thing that you've added. If you've added a text view or a button, it goes straight to look at the edit text area.
Let's go with no.
Okay.
So this guy right here is, if I'm the activity, I'm going to go on a hunt looking for the student with that foo number. Okay. Now, when I find you, initially I find you and you are just student, generic student. When the activity first finds this guy, you are he's a generic view. Okay, now once I find you though, immediately we can determine, are you a male student or a female student? Okay, we can zero in on, a more specific version of who you are. Are you nice or are you mean? That kind of stuff, right? Okay, so this guy is going to find us a generic view. We happen to know that the view with this unique ID is actually an edit text. So we could store it as a generic view and then turn it into an edit text every single time we wanted to use it. Or, since we know it's an edit text and we have a variable capable of holding an edit text, we can go ahead and say, I'm going to typecast you to what you actually are. We put a label on you. It's like, we found a male student, put a sticker on them, say, now people can identify you as a male student. Okay? We can identify you as having long hair or short hair, that kind of stuff. All right, so we're putting a label on this guy. So from this point forward, when we reference our variable jersey number ET, we can reference the things that make edit text special compared to generic views, specifically getting text and setting text. All right, so now let's go ahead and get our second guy. So we'll say this dot skill level ET is equal to the edit text version of this dot find view by ID r dot ID dot skill level ET. So exact same thing. So now we have programmatic access to those two guys. Now, when we click this Add Player button pressed, we want to go ahead and get the jersey number and the we want to get the jersey number and we want to get the skill level from there. Now we can have a error if we want that if they didn't put the stuff in. In fact, we have plenty of time, so let's just do that real quick. So I'm going to go out here to our add player screen, and I'm going to throw another text view out here. All right, and we're going to we'll center this, and let's make the text color light red, kind of for like error text. Make that guy centered, and let's call this guy error TV for text view. So we'll come back into our add player activity. We're going to give ourselves another text view. So private edit text error TV. This dot error TV is equal to the actually, this is not an edit text. This is a text view. This is the text view version of this dot find view by ID r.id.error TV. Okay, so now what we can do is we can ask a series of questions because we want to make sure they gave us our information before we just haphazardly create a player. Okay, for right now we can assume that they gave us numbers if they put stuff in there, but we really want to check, is it still equal to the empty string? If it's still equal to the empty string, then that means you didn't give us anything. So we'll ask the first question, did they enter in a jersey number? So if this dot jersey number dot get text dot toString dot length is equal to 0, if they didn't put anything in there, then what do? We're going to say this dot error TV dot set text to you must enter a jersey number. Else if this dot skill level et dot get text dot toString dot length is equal to 0. So if they didn't enter in a skill level, we'll give them an error message. You must enter a skill level. Else, everything is cool. We should create our player and add it. So first thing we can do is we can say this dot error TV dot set text equal to nothing. So we'll go ahead and get rid of any previous error message that used to be there. That way we just don't have a random error message sitting there. All right, then we want to go ahead and create a brand new player. Well, we need to go ahead and get the integer version of our jersey number and the integer version of our skill level. So we'll say int jersey number is equal to this dot jersey number et dot get text. Ooh, hello. What time does class get out? Oh, we got plenty of time. I just hear crap, but not using their time wisely, are they? I had a 4-hour class last night. We went 20 minutes over.
Finish that out.
No, actually, we were babbling about stuff. Yeah, as usual. If you haven't noticed, sometimes I get off topic. Yeah, but it makes it entertaining, doesn't it? And then we got to figure out how we got to where we got.
Added value.
That's right. You can't pay for this kind of entertainment. Okay, so this dot jersey number et dot get text dot toString, because get text, if you look at this here real quick, just to explain that, get text gives you this thing of type editable. It's kind of like a string with extra features in it. So we actually want to squeeze the string, generic string out of that to give, so because we know how to work with strings in here. So getText.toString gives us the actual string. Now, how do we convert strings into integers? Don't we have a little tool in our toolbox that can convert a string into an integer? What is that tool? integer.parseInt, that guy. So I'm going to steal this line here real quick because that's going to be my parameter for it. We'll say integer.parseInt, and we'll go ahead and pass it the string we want to parse the int out of. Now, this guy, what kind of animal is he? Field, method, or constructor? What's parseInt? Okay. All right. So tell me why it's a method and not a field.
Parentheses.
Okay. Parentheses immediately disqualify field. Okay. So how do you know it's a method, not a constructor? Who don't we see hanging around? The new keyword. No new keyword there, not a constructor. Okay? Now I'm kind of giving you these like rules of thumb. Because one thing, and I've harped on this, but you know, hopefully you can tell that it is important. It's very easy when you look at code to assume that you know what something does, but until you break it down, you don't actually know what it does. It's easy to assume that something is a string when it actually boils down to an int. Okay, that kind of stuff. So you want to get used to kind of deconstructing the stuff you're working with. And then what will happen is if you kind of take the break now to do that, eventually you'll be able to just sit there and you'll still always do it, but it just magically happens. So for those of you who drive, you've been driving for several years now, so maybe since you were 16 or something like that. When you first started driving, you know, you kind of had to make it a habit of, you know, checking your mirrors, looking up there, you know, it was like you almost had to remind yourself to do that. But now you probably find yourself when you're driving, you'll kind of like haphazardly glance at stuff. It's not even like part of, you don't think about doing it. You just kind of do it so you become aware of your surroundings, right? You know, it's something that you naturally start doing. Hopefully we're checking our mirrors and stuff, and stuff like that. Okay, if you don't want to use that example, you know, when you're walking down the hall, you kind of become aware of what's going on around you, especially when you're texting, right? So if you're walking forward and you're texting, you're kind of constantly like glancing ahead, just slightly, right? Just to make sure that there's not like a immovable object in front of you, or you detect the initial shadow of somebody you're about to impact, and then you can swerve. So these are things that we kind of passively do. So that'll start happening. All right, so this will give us the string that lives inside of Jersey Numbers text box. This will squeeze the integer version of that out, and we'll store that integer version inside of this variable. And we'll say int skill level is equal to integer.parseInt this dot skill level dot get text dot toString. So same thing there. Then we want to go ahead and get a player. So we're gonna, now that we have our two pieces of information that players need, here's our player class. All right, and this is our constructor for player. How do we know that that guy's a constructor? I'm looking at the definition of it right now. How do I know that he's a constructor? Go ahead.
It uses the name of the class.
Okay, it uses, okay, that's a true statement. Why does, so this guy, it has, this matches this, right? Okay, what makes that a constructor?
Well, it has parentheses, it takes two parameters.
Okay.
It doesn't use a new keyword.
Okay, new keyword would never be involved here. New keyword is only when we use a constructor. So this is us defining a constructor. Constructors always have the same name as the class. They also never have a return type. Okay, that's what makes a constructor in Java. Okay, so our player constructor requires two parameters from us. It requires an integer representation of our jersey number and an integer representation of our skill level, and it goes ahead and it does the magic of building a player for us. So we'll come back over here. So we'll say player P is equal to a new player, because we need the new keyword in order to call constructors. And we'll pass this guy our jersey number and our skill level. So now we have our player, and what do we want to do with that player? have a player right here. Where do we put our players after we recruited them onto the team? Am I just done? Just let automatic garbage collection come and assassinate this dude? It's like, my work is done. Creation! He's gone. Put it in our array list. And where does our array list live?
Singleton.
Inside of our singleton. All right, so we're going to say core dot, what do I call it? The players. Yeah, I called it core dot the players. Whatever. Wasn't detecting it. Dot add. And what are we adding? We're adding P to that guy. Oh, did I not make that guy static up here? Oh, yeah. It was static at one of the points, and then I was probably explaining it and stopped writing it. Okay, so this guy is a static array list of capable of holding players called the players. Therefore, we call it using core dot the players dot add that player. So now the player has been added to our screen. And then when we're ready to go to the go back, we could say this dot. I think it's this dot. Isn't it exit? Finish. This dot finish. So this will make that activity end, taking us back to the previous activity. All right, so let's go ahead and run this guy. And we know that we've added our player to our array list. Oh, it's running in the background here. So we go to add player. If I, probably need to set the text for that guy to nothing initially. This dot error TV dot set text to the empty string, so we don't see an error right off the bat. I could have zeroed it out in the interface, but if we did that, then we kind of lose the fact that it's there. So I'll just do it programmatically here. All right, let's just go back here so we can show that that does it because it reloaded that activity. So we click on add player. We see no error message. If I click add player right now, I haven't hooked this guy up to his. So this is the add player button pressed. We need to teach that button to call this guy on click. Here's our add player. Here's this dude. Here's his on click. And I'm going to backspace that and then press enter, and it puts it back in there, but that's fine. It seems to put it back in there more better than it was before. So I'll click on add player. It yells at us, you must enter a jersey number. So I'll go ahead and put in 14. Click it again. It yells at us, you must enter a skill level. I'll put in a 2. Then I click add player. It will grab the integer 14 out of the string 14. It will grab the integer 2 out of the string 2. Then it will add our player. Then it will create our player object. Then it will add that player object to our core thing and take us back to the screen. So that player has been added to our array list now. Okay? Let's see here. I need to be able to, here, just show you something real quick. Activity main. I'm going to name our vertical view. So we're going to call this guy player list. And then inside of main activity, I'm going to give myself access to that player list. Private linear layout player list. And then here I'll say this dot player list is equal to linear layout. This dot find view by ID, r dot ID dot player list. I know we're basically out of time, but this will only take 5 seconds. So then what I'll do here is I'm just going to give you the example code so you'll know what you need to do for this. This dot player list. Actually, just do it this way. Text view TV is equal to a new text view. I need to pass it a context, so the context is an activity, so this. And then I'll say tv.setText to blah. And then I'll say this dot player list dot add view TV. So now I programmatically added a text view called blah to that player list. And this will happen when, well, after I launch that activity. So let me show it to you real quick. Here's my add player. I go here. You probably just saw it show up in there. When I go back, notice that I have an extra guy there. If I do it again, notice another one's there. So now you see how you can programmatically add guys there. So for next class, show here a list of all your players. Under this button, you should have a list of your roster. That make sense? All right. Have I already deployed this to GitHub? Are you sure? It doesn't look like I can so share project on GitHub. CSC250 _ whatever. Just call it team roster. Share. It'll be up there. I'll give you a link to it and put it in chat program. What's the name of the chat program? Slack. Nailed it. All right. All right. So you guys can view that code. So bring your code up to date with mine, and then on that main screen, just show a list of all your players. So you're going to have to be able to get a string representation of your players so you can set those text views text to that string. Make sense?
Could I ask you some questions about outside programming ventures?
Sure.
Okay.